It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The Prime Minister says he will press ahead with plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The government doubles down on its pledge to stop the boats after the Supreme Court rejects the Rwanda policy.
Let me tell everybody now, I will not allow a foreign court to block these flights.
But for those who could be sent to Rwanda, it's not political, it's personal. We'll hear from them and get reaction from voters. Dividing lines for Labour after MPs resign from Sir Keir Starmer's front bench following the Gaza ceasefire vote. Israel says it's found Hamas weapons inside Gaza's main hospital, something Hamas claims is a lie. And
we're on the ground inside Gaza, where we are seeing Palestinians being evacuated from their destroyed homes around them. The Israeli military is sweeping through, but at what cost?
Also tonight, inflation slows to a 2-year low, but many people still won't feel the benefit in their pockets this winter. And up close in Iceland's ghost town, evacuated after earthquakes and fears of a volcanic eruption. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. The government was dealt a blow by the Supreme Court today. It lost its bid to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, the court's ruling that the country is not deemed safe enough. Well, speaking to the Rwandan president today, the Prime Minister said he is committed to making the partnership work. And tonight he announced a new international treaty and emergency legislation, which he says will make Rwanda safe for migrants and mean flights of asylum seekers can take off. Well, sending people to Rwanda and stopping the boats was one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges. But the policy has faced a number of hurdles after first being proposed by Boris Johnson in April last year. Sky's political editor Beth Rigby has this report.
Refugee rights are human rights.
This a landmark moment at Britain's highest court for those who would make Britain their home.
Rwanda is unsafe! Rwanda is unsafe!
And a government that's made immigration the cornerstone of its mandate. The Supreme Court ruling then a body blow for Rishi Sunak. Judges unanimous. The Rwanda deportation plan unlawful.
The Home Secretary's appeal is therefore dismissed.
The size of the media scrum reflecting the magnitude of the moment for both sides. The government had been managing expectations, but with the stakes so high, the victor's relief palpable. Were you always confident that you were going to win this case?
No.
You weren't? Why not?
We were always confident that we had a very strong case and we put it to the courts properly, but you can never be confident in a case like this.
And the government now has a huge problem. Their flagship immigration policy grounded, questions now over where to go next. There is a big movement within the Conservative Party that the solution to this is to withdraw from the ECHR. What's your view of that?
It would be a damning indictment on this country were we to join Russia, Belarus in withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights.
Has your plan failed, Prime Minister?
The judgment delivered, the Prime Minister to Parliament to face the music.
He promised that he would stop the boats this year. This year. Today is the 15th of November. He's wasted all of his time on a gimmick, and now he's absolutely nowhere.
The new Home Secretary clear the government will push on with the Rwanda plan, but there was pushback too. James cleverly suggesting the government will now rewrite legislation to try again.
The Prime Minister has said that if our domestic legal framework frustrates our plans, he is prepared to change our laws. But I will inform the House we are not going to put forward proposals simply to manufacture an unnecessary row for political gain.
But for some on the Conservative benches, that row no laughing matter. And for the PM, another headache. MPs warning he has to get this policy working or face the consequences. It's the next Tory civil war, isn't it, Simon?
Well, I hope not, because I believe that the Prime Minister will respond with appropriate firmness. Certainly, it is a vital question of his leadership that he does.
OK, but if he doesn't, then it is a civil war, because you guys will go to war with him over it.
I hope we don't need to, Beth.
A PM warned, and by the afternoon, he was ready to present the details of his new plan.
We will take the extraordinary step of introducing emergency legislation. This will enable Parliament to confirm that with our new treaty, Rwanda is safe. It will ensure that people cannot further delay flights by bringing systemic challenges in our domestic courts and stop our policy being repeatedly blocked.
His day in court, and the Prime Minister really needed a win. Instead, the linchpin of his immigration policy now not just loose, but lost. The Prime Minister insists that he will pass new laws through Parliament and flights will get off the ground next spring. But even as he said it, allies of Suella Braverman told me that this was more magical thinking. A Prime Minister doubling down, only to rinse and repeat. Another torrid day for Rishi Sunak's government, straight off the back of a divisive reshuffle. And this latest attempt to keep a key promise to voters, for now, raising far more questions than it answers. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
So the Prime Minister has vowed to change the law, committing to his pledge to stop the boats. But what do people think of what happened today? Sky's Communities correspondent Becky Johnson has been getting the thoughts of some voters, as well as gauging reaction from asylum seekers.
In this market town in Staffordshire, we found frustration. Many here told us they wanted to see migrants sent to Rwanda.
We've got that many people here, and we're looking after them, but we're not looking after our own.
They're angry with the decision of the Supreme Court.
People who work in the courts have got money. They're OK with their lives. What they don't understand is there's people really, really desperate for homes and they can't afford to live, basically. And we're giving all our money to the asylum seekers.
It's a view the Prime Minister knows many voters share, and he'll hope for their support as he fights to find a way to get flights going to Rwanda.
I know in some countries it's hard for them. I really do understand that. And it is a shame, but we need to look after our own backyard first.
The Home Secretary's appeal is therefore dismissed.
But for these asylum seekers, the ruling wasn't political, it was personal. These men who are staying in a migrant hotel celebrated the court's decision.
No Rwanda anymore. I'm very happy because we don't go to Rwanda, we like England.
Mohammed, who's from Syria, shows me this.
England.
It's from the small boat he crossed the channel in this August. He made the dangerous journey even though he knew he could have ended up in Rwanda.
We couldn't give up and we couldn't just go back. We have tried our best to just come into the United Kingdom, even so if they send us to Rwanda.
If the court had ruled differently and said, yes, asylum seekers can go to Rwanda, would that have stopped people coming over in small boats?
Rwanda, I don't think this will have stopped people, because the people are fleeing not because of Rwanda or scared of Rwanda. They're scared of their life, of the safety and what's going on in these countries in the Middle East.
For now, the court's decision has given them hope, but with the government determined to try anything, they'll have to wait to see what happens next. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Staffordshire.
Well, Beth Rigby joins me now on a policy, Beth, seemingly in disarray, but having the flames fanned still by the Prime Minister.
I mean, look, Anna, I think the first thing to say about this is that when you strip all of it away, this is a major blow to a government that has made sending failed asylum seekers to Rwanda the flagship of its immigration plan. And today, the Supreme Court ruled that that was unlawful. But far from scrapping this scheme, the Prime Minister today is doubling down. And today he gave yet another promise to the British people that flights will go to Rwanda in spring next year. And I have to say, sitting in that press briefing, hear him say those words, my eyebrows shot up, because I thought for 18 months now, since April 22, when this policy was announced, the government has been in legal wrangles with no planes off the ground. And now the Prime Minister says in the next 3 months or so, I'm going to solve this problem and I'm going to get those flights away. And it does raise tonight so many more questions than it answers. Of course, we need to see the detail of the legislation. But while he has a big majority in the Commons, how is he going to get this through the House of Lords? Is it going to get bogged down in rows in Parliament? Even if he does pass the legislation, then how does he deal with the European courts? He said today, I won't let them stop me. What's he actually going to do about it? How far is he prepared to go? And crucially, how quickly can he make this happen? Because whatever happens in terms of the legislation to get this policy off the ground, he's now set himself a real life test, and that's that these planes will get off the ground next spring. I spoke to one former cabinet minister tonight saying even if he manages to achieve his aims, the timetable seems so tight, it's hard to see how it happens. So a Prime Minister really with his, back on the ropes again regarding a keynote policy, tonight making pledges we're not sure he can keep. It's another big moment of jeopardy for the Prime Minister and for the government.
Beth, live in Downing Street. Thank you. 8 Labour frontbench MPs, including the shadow Home Office Minister Jess Phillips, have quit tonight over their party's position on Gaza. Labour and the SNP both tabled amendments to the King's speech, Labour calling for a pause in the fighting, the SNP calling for a full ceasefire. Both were defeated, but 56 Labour MPs went against Sir Keir Starmer's wishes, backing those calls for a ceasefire. Sky's political correspondent Tamara Cohen reports.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
Outside the gates of Parliament, these protesters want a ceasefire in Israel and Gaza.
The ayes to the right, 125. The noes to the left, 293.
Inside, MPs vote overwhelmingly against one. 56 Labour MPs defied their leader, who says a ceasefire is not the right decision, leaving party divisions badly exposed.
We need a full and immediate ceasefire now. My constituents have demanded this, and I will not refuse them. Supporting a ceasefire is the very least we can do.
My conscience tells me that I must call for a ceasefire today, for a halt to this dreadful destruction and conflict where far too many have already died on both sides, and more will continue to die if the violence does not cease. We must call for a ceasefire.
These are the 11 shadow ministers and aides who voted for a ceasefire anyway and have to resign their posts. One of them told me MPs were feeling intense pressure.
The emails that I've had are very reflective and very supportive of an immediate ceasefire. People are watching their screens, people are watching babies dying, people are watching babies, premature babies in incubators not having oxygen and dying. People are watching these stories, these horrors unfolding in their living rooms on their screens.
All those rebelling tonight are in junior positions, but the sheer numbers are still a challenge to Keir Starmer's authority. What Labour MPs vote for may not change much on the battlefield, but it's a sign he'll need to tread carefully when it comes to foreign policy.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
The UK government and Western allies have backed Israel's right to go after Hamas for the atrocities carried out on October the 7th. Keir Starmer said that he had shown leadership. He regretted that some of his colleagues were unable to accept it. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Westminster.
Israel says its soldiers have been searching Gaza's main hospital, accusing Hamas of running a command centre in tunnels under the hospital. Doctors at Al-Shifa have reported running out of fuel and food for patients, and the World Health Organization says it's now lost contact with staff there. Well, Hamas says the claims by Israel that weapons have been found in the building was a blatant lie. Well, the Al-Shifa hospital in northern Gaza has found the war closing in around it as Israeli forces continue to advance further into the enclave. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, is in Israel and sent this report.
To move in on a hospital with tanks and troops is a big step for any military, potentially a violation of the rules of war, especially if it involves combat. There was a firefight as Israelis entered Al-Shifa hospital, killing at least 4 Hamas fighters, not recorded in the footage they've released. To justify the operation, Israel needed to prove the hospital poses a military threat. This is what they say they've found so far. Guns hidden behind MRI machines and in cupboards in hospital buildings. About a dozen in total in this footage, as well as grenades and ammunition.
That houses medical equipment. You can see all kinds of stuff.
Humanitarian organisations are outraged by the operation, saying it is unjustified.
Israel's military incursion into Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City is totally unacceptable. Hospitals are not battlegrounds. We're extremely worried for the safety of staff and patients.
The operation has only compounded Gaza's medical crisis. Sky News filmed at Al-Aqsa Hospital to the south, where doctors were sent the injured, unable to reach Al-Shifa because of the Israeli military action.
We're dealing with a large number of wounded people, in addition to the injured people that came to us from Al-Shifa Hospital. This is a catastrophic situation, and if we are not supplied with fuel and surgery equipment, the situation will get harder and harder.
Palestinians claim Israel had attacked Al-Shifa in recent days, and this was the aftermath. They say there was gunfire during this operation and artillery fire that damaged buildings. In a statement, Hamas said the Zionist occupation's claim that it found weapons and military equipment at Al-Shifa is nothing but a continuation of its lies and cheap propaganda, trying to justify its genocidal crimes, destroying the health sector in Gaza. Now it's in control of a third of Gaza. Israel has more responsibility for the 200,000 to 300,000 civilians thought to still be living there. But there is little sign so far of it launching a large-scale humanitarian mission in the wake of its military campaign there. Israel did deliver some medical supplies to Al-Shifa, but aid organisations say much more is needed. An urgent pause in fighting lasting days to let enough help reach those who need it. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, let's take a closer look at what is happening inside the Al-Shifa hospital. Sky's data and forensics team has been analysing some of the footage and maps which showed the operations on the ground. Our correspondent Tom Cheshire reports.
This is an all-encompassing war, but we've also seen a steady focusing of the conflict, a progressive centering in of the view. On Gaza to start, then northern Gaza, and then Al-Shifa hospital. Right now, the most powerful symbol of this conflict. It is the biggest hospital in Gaza, a huge complex where hundreds of people, potentially thousands, are being treated or sheltering. At the same time, it's been treating patients, though, it's been the focus of Israeli military operations. Now, this is all the parts of the hospital that we know, as well as some of the incidents in the fighting. And those incidents are because the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, says that Al-Shifa serves as a command center for Hamas, which uses the hospital as a shield, which would be a war crime. And the parts in red over here are what the IDF claim are Hamas positions. And the US said on Tuesday that its own intelligence indicates Hamas has a center underneath the hospital. It's also worth mentioning that a report back in 2014 from Amnesty International, so a bit more independent, said that Hamas used Al-Shifa as a base to torture people, although that was a few years ago. Now, Hamas has repeatedly denied those claims. This is what Al-Shifa looks like on the 3D view. You get a sense of the scale of the hospital, the difficulty of operating there, especially with civilians around. And that, nonetheless, is exactly what the IDF has been doing. These photos show what they call a targeted military operation they launched overnight on the ground. The IDF has also said that incubators, baby food, and medical supplies have successfully reached Al-Shifa hospital. This is the video they put out, and Sky News has been able to locate and verify it. This photo shows the hospital forecourt on the 9th of November, so a few days ago, but it has become a de facto refugee camp. Now, again, Hamas insists the hospitals are for civilians only. And the Palestinian Health Authority, which is controlled by Hamas, has posted videos like these from inside the hospital. This was on the 10th of November. You can see women, apparently wounded people, and the strain the hospital appears to be under. All of that claim, counterclaim, points to Al-Shifa's position, not just in the middle of the kinetic conflict, but also at the centre of the information war, a battle for the world's attention, and most importantly, its sympathy.
Tom Cheshire there. Well, as we've seen, the Israeli Defence Forces are continuing their military operations deep inside Gaza. It says it's created humanitarian corridors to give people safe passage out of northern Gaza. Our correspondent Mark Stone has been along the Salah al-Din road in the southeast of the territory. His reporting was subject to Israeli military restrictions.
Deep inside Gaza, 2 miles from the heart of the fighting, there they were. Several hundred Palestinians, young and elderly, ID cards in hand, in a thin line facing south. The voice is an Israeli soldier. In Arabic, they're told that they will be safe if they comply. And beyond, what's left of their homes. We're just to the southeast of Gaza City, next to Salah al-Din Street, and the Israeli military has brought us here to show us a glimpse of what they say are their attempts to protect people.
Well, this is the first time we've seen with our own eyes some of the civilians who are trying to leave. This is what the Israelis say is a humanitarian corridor that they've set up. They've paused fighting in this area to allow all the people that you can see here to move south.
On the face of it, this is good news, but to see it in just those terms misses the point, because in their minds, this is forced displacement from homes that are now gone.
11,000 people dead, killed in 4 weeks.
Yeah, well, those are big numbers, but when we judge, then it's not about the numbers, it's about eliminating evil, and we saw what Hamas could do, what Hamas intends to do.
And to those who say that in eliminating evil, you are reaping misery on 2 million people, what do you say?
They're welcome to take that question straight back to Hamas. You can see here with your own eyes how much efforts we're putting in to let innocent civilians out.
Well, I have to say it is deeply frustrating. You can see them just there. The Israeli military won't let us any closer. We can't talk to them. Their assessment is that there could be Hamas fighters among them, and it's just not safe to.
We moved quickly. They wanted to show us part of Gaza's tunnel system. The soldiers say that Hamas fighters continue to emerge from the network below ground. This is the road Hamas militants drove down for their massacre on October the 7th. And it is the road that they took to bring their hostages back. A few miles away, what's left of a village. And it's clear that it's far from secure. Behind a house, a hole. They lowered explosives down the hole, and then, from a distance, this was a glimpse of just what they wanted us to see. But even from this, it's hard to see what victory looks like. The cost, though, well, that's clear. Mark Stone, Sky News in Gaza.
Well, back here, and there has been one victory for the government today. Inflation fell to 4.6%. That is lower than expected and means that the Prime Minister has now made his pledge to halve inflation by the end of the year. But while inflation is falling rapidly, the bad news is it doesn't mean life is getting any easier for many households. The cost of most things, energy, food and other essentials have not gone down. Sky's economics and data editor Ed Conway explains.
Right, can you sit nicely? I skip meals all the time. I'm used to it. If I go hungry, I go hungry. As long as my son's fed, that's all that matters to me. You're a good boy.
The economic data may be improving, but for Jo and her family, life is still getting harder. Higher bills, rising prices, and since she has to stay at home looking after her son, who has developmental needs, the squeeze has been severe.
We only do like one shop every month because that's what we can afford. So we get as much as we can in that shop and then try and make it last as long as we possibly can.
For many across the country, this is the reality. So while the government can now say inflation has halved, actually, things are a bit more nuanced than that.
You can see how prices have gone up, double-digit inflation over there last year, coming down. The government wanted to get it to there, halving inflation. That would constitute halving inflation. Indeed, it's now through there, 4.6% CPI inflation. But that's the rate at which prices are rising. So inflation is the rate at which they're rising or falling. And look, they're still in that kind of red territory and quite high. And you get a sense of this, that lump, that increase in prices when you look at the Ofgem price cap. It went up very much. In the future, it's expected to remain around that kind of level. And just look at the difference between what there was before, so the pre-2022 average, and where we're going to be potentially next year. That is about 75% higher bills than we had before.
Still, the Chancellor happy to bask in this rare bit of good news.
Aren't you just trying to take credit for something that's not actually your responsibility? I mean, it's the Bank of England's job to bring inflation down.
A year ago, markets were worried that borrowing and debt were out of control. We took difficult decisions to bring that borrowing and debt down. And as a result of that, we made it easier for the Bank of England to do their job.
Food prices are still rising at a double-digit rate, partly because a lot of the costs in farms and dairies like this one actually come back to energy.
We are over the peak, but those prices still remain higher than they were 2 or 3 years ago. Our costs are about 30% ahead of where they were in 2019 from a farm level, but we're also seeing volatility on fuel prices, electricity prices.
So a modicum of good news. But as autumn turns to winter, those uncomfortable decisions are coming back to haunt us. How much to heat, how much to eat.
Obviously now that it's coming into the colder months and like, the heating's coming on, but I won't have it on at all throughout the day because I just can't afford it. It's too expensive.
Inflation has now halved, but the cost of living crisis, that isn't over yet. Ed Conway, Sky News.
Joe Biden met the Chinese leader Xi Jinping for the first time in a year today for talks aimed at easing friction between the two superpowers. The pair are meeting at an economic summit in San Francisco. Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner joins us now from Woodside in California, south of San Francisco, in a grand estate for this meeting, Martha. So what are we seeing here? A thaw in relations?
Possibly, Anna. President Biden and President Xi have been meeting for around 3 hours now in the building behind me. This is a country estate more commonly associated as an upmarket wedding venue. Well, today this is an attempt to avoid full-blown divorce between two world powers. That is just how low the relationship between the United States and China has been going into this meeting. So the White House saying this is about avoiding this relationship spiralling into conflict. And we saw the tensions evidenced earlier this year with those Chinese spy balloons dispatched over areas of military significance in the United States. So President Biden was saying earlier that this is about finding joint areas of cooperation, and that was echoed by President Xi. He said this planet is big enough for the both of us. There are, though, plenty of areas of disagreement between the two countries. Tensions over the South China Sea and Taiwan, tensions over artificial intelligence, and also what's going on in the Middle East. China sending some messaging out that it didn't support the way that Israel was conducting its offensive in Gaza. You'd expect President Biden to be pushing President Xi to use his relationship with Iran to avoid Iran and its proxies getting dragged into this war and it becoming a wider regional conflict. So plenty to chew over. There will be no joint statement between the two leaders, but we do expect to hear from President Biden later.
Full coverage of that then. Martha, thank you. Well, thousands of people have left their homes in Iceland after scientists warned that the area near the capital Reykjavik has seen an increase in seismic activity and could be close to a volcanic eruption. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore has been allowed in to Grindavik to take a closer look.
We've now been allowed through the barriers on the edge of the exclusion zone. We've got about 15 miles to drive to Grindavik. We've got a police escort right at the front there. They're extremely nervous about taking people in right now because the risk is so high. Just coming into Grindavik now. There's a few lights on in some of the houses.
but they'll all be empty.
This area here is really not secure, so I advise you not to walk on the grass here.
We are standing in a regular town. There's a shop over there, its lights are still on. Round this way you've got flats. Over here a sports centre, leading to more residential areas that way. And here is a church. But right in the middle is this enormous crack in the earth. This is steam that is coming up from hot water pipes that have been ripped open as the ground has split apart. And you can see the water trickling down here. And goodness knows how deep that will go. The ground has just been pulled apart and raised up too, one side falling quite sharply. That's probably about a meter's difference. It's possible that this may never erupt, that the magma may solidify, cool down. But I suppose there must be that concern that it may be a weak point in the bedrock, that there could be at some point in the future another build-up of molten rock. What psychological effect does have on people? How do they sleep at night, knowing that there is molten material beneath their feet?
Thomas Moore there. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail columnist, Amanda Patel. Great to see both of you. Among the stories, we will be discussing this on the front of the Financial Times. Their headline, a defiant Sunak vows to change the law as a top court strikes down his Rwanda policy. Back with more on all those stories in just a moment. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. The Prime Minister has said he will bring in emergency legislation after the Supreme Court said his plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda was unlawful. 8 members of Labour's front bench team have quit their roles tonight. They were among more than 50 Labour MPs who defied the party leadership to back an SNP parliamentary motion for a full ceasefire in Gaza. Well, Israel's military says it's entered Gaza's largest hospital looking for Hamas targets. Hamas denies using it as a base. Well, hello there. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel with us from now until just before midnight. Plenty to discuss today, I think, don't you? So let's check out the front pages then, shall we? And after the Supreme Court struck down the government's plan to ship migrants to Rwanda as unlawful, the Financial Times reports that Rishi Sunak is now planning to change UK law to sidestep the ruling. The Metro 2 says the PM has a plan to still get his way and start flights to Rwanda next year. That promise also the lead story for tomorrow's Guardian newspaper, the PM vowing to push through his plan. Telegraph 2, with that angle, the PM will use an emergency law to restart those Rwanda flights, or start rather, as does the Times, which says the PM will do whatever is necessary to deport migrants. This is the Express. PM fights back. We will deport migrants. And this is the Sun's take on it as well, commenting on how fed up Mr Sunak must now be. Well, the Daily Mail's Quentin Letts writes the front page for his paper, describing what he calls Rishi Sunak's ice blue anger at that Supreme Court ruling. The Eye leads with today's bigger-than-expected inflation fall, which means pensioners are in for a rise in April that is double the current rate. Kevin's paper, The Mirror, has news of a row over a new book, which reportedly reveals private details of the Queen's death last year. And the Daily Star tells us to expect snow by the end of this month as temperatures start to fall rapidly. I hope not. My heating's been broken for 3 weeks now. Anyway, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. Hot water bottles. You gasped.
You're kidding me?
Yeah.
3 weeks without eating?
Yeah.
Just think how much you've saved.
No, we've had fun.
You always think about
well, yeah,
I just think how much I would just shiver.
You've got to look on the bright side.
Through. It's getting quite expensive to keep trying to fix it.
Yeah, the glass has to be half full, not half empty.
Okay.
I mean, you know.
You can come and stay at my place, Anna.
Oh, that's really kind. Lovely. As long as you've got like a fluffy throw or something, because I'm properly thawed now. Anyway, should we talk about what's happened today?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because a lot has happened. So Kevin and Amanda, welcome to both of you. Let's kick off with any number of newspapers that are leading on the Rwanda ruling by the Supreme Court. And out he comes later on today, Rishi Sunak out fighting.
Yeah, an absolute crushing defeat. The UK Supreme Court, calling in not just the European Convention of Human Rights, which Tories don't like, or some Tories don't like, but also the United Nations Convention on Refugees and UK domestic law. Absolutely crushing. And then, of course, you've got a kicking at PMQs, but then he comes out fighting in the afternoon with this idea of emergency legislation. Now, if that emergency legislation just says Rwanda is safe to send refugees, there'll be a whole series of legal challenges again. You can just see going through the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and back to the UK Supreme Court. So the talk is tough, but let's see if you can walk it. I mean, personally, I think the whole Rwanda deal was a big con anyway, because it's only a few hundred, it's not tens of thousands.
Are you going to stop and let me say something?
40 million, yeah.
Does that ever happen?
But not yet.
It's the deterrent effect, isn't it? That's the point.
Yeah, but it's not a deterrent if it's only a few hundred and you've got 30,000 people coming, which actually is well down on last year, isn't it? Because it was 45,000 last year.
I know.
I mean, but that's not the deterrent. That's just because you get better enforcement, and also Albanians now, they'll be sent back under the deal, which is probably the way to do it, not try and dump people in Rwanda.
Yes, you know that scientists
finished?
say correlation doesn't equal causation. And just because the figures are down, it could just be that we had a heat wave last year and had terrible weather.
And terrible storms this
Terrible storms this year.
And there can be a lot of... are you actually going to let me
I was just saying, but you told me to stop.
No,
you didn't tell Anna, did you? I mean, that's really
sorry.
sexist.
Anna
isn't
is-
it? You can speak, but I can't.
Anna is the boss, and she's also freezing without heating for 3 weeks. I have some sympathy.
Yeah.
I feel great consternation coming on tonight because I'm supposed to be here as the Conservative. I am a Conservative, lifelong one. And today I despaired at all of this news. You know, we see Rishi Sunak appearing at that sort of botched up faux COVID presentation saying, stop the boats. It reminded me of, you know, stay home and don't kill each other. And I just thought the whole thing felt completely faux. It felt totally fraudulent to me. He, you know, to come out suddenly to say, oh, we're going to bring in emergency legislation and we're going to stop all of this. And yet he will not go to the point, and he never said it. Listen to all of his speeches today. I'm a sad person with heating in my home. And I listened to all of it, and he never once said, I will renege laws outside of this country. He said, I will challenge them. I'll go close to it. I'm thinking about it. I'm really, really considering it. But he never said that.
But Amanda,
and again, because he's such a lefty, Rishi.
But Kevin's made this point. It's the UK court that has stopped this policy under UK laws, and that you know, you don't need to worry about the ECHR.
But
right
actually, there's
the other conventions.
No, there is a worry for your reputation as a nation.
Okay.
If you're seen of ditching these commonly used laws about human rights that are respected throughout the world, there's a big gamble in doing that. But the right wanted him to ditch it and to say, we will come out of this. He did not do that. He did his usual thing, skated around the edges.
Because you know, they do not want to be lumped with the other people that, you know, are not signatories of it, which
Belarus
is Russia and Belarus.
Russia,
I mean, do you want to be with them?
No, it's just... I just thought that the whole thing today was a pantomime. You know, he gets completely slapped down, and then he comes out at a press conference at 4:45, and then you've got the who was it before, our new Home Secretary
James Cleverly.
James coming out saying, we've done all these things, we've achieved this in the last year, and we've got a plan. When the person who achieved all of that is Suella Braverman, who they sacked on Monday.
Yeah, but you know, the European...
James hadn't done it. Rishi hadn't done it.
The European Convention of Human Rights, which the UK promoted and lawyers wrote it after the Second World War, is for us all. It's not just for asylum seekers, refugees, migrants. It's for us all. It's been used, for instance, to stop teachers beating kids in schools. It's been used by disabled people to enforce their rights. It's been used by people the right to medical treatment. It's been used by women so they can't be aggressively questioned and humiliated when they're alleging rape in court cases. It's for us all. And I think if Britain pulled out, we would be with two pariah states in Europe. We would be with Belarus.
It would be incredibly
and
popular
terrible.
with a large number of Conservatives.
Yeah, because they don't think it through.
And he would never go close enough. And now he's brought in David Cameron, who's so enthralled to Europe, as we all know.
Yeah, but it's not the European Union, though, is it? Right? You just got to remember that.
Over the place.
Yes. Well, Natalie Elphig, MP for Dover, who clearly is on the front line of this effectively, you know, thinks Rwanda should be junked and actually praised David Cameron for being in very close relations with President Macron, which allows part of the policy to the deal with France to...
let's hope she didn't get into a close relationship with China.
Yeah, but you know, the deal with Albania is the way forward. It's painstaking, it's difficult. Rwanda was always something of a con. There was always a tiny little bit of me that hoped it would get through.
Oh, you're lying.
And the reason
You're
is
so lying,
because it would be shown to be unworkable. It wouldn't deliver what was promised because the deterrent effect wouldn't be great enough. It's incredibly expensive.
When Anna goes like that, it means you have to shut up.
No, it doesn't. We've got the Times now. Sunak, many of the newspapers going on this emergency law, which could save the Rwanda policy, of which there was vagueness and nobody in that news conference actually asked him how those would work, or this treaty, which I found fascinating. So Suella Braverman said in her resignation letter, her resignation sacking letter, that there was no plan B. Well, he came out with effectively plan Bs, which was a treaty with Rwanda and emergency legislation.
He said, and who would have worked on that? It would have been her. And he said, we've been working on this for several months. Well,
several hours.
It would be very interesting to see what Suella says when she comes out with her evidence about how he was not interested in it whatsoever.
He changed the story by coming up, dreaming this emergency legislation. Because in the morning, he's just humiliated, crushed. It's a disaster for him.
Yeah.
And then he comes out fighting, and he's turned the headlines round for a short while. But can he pull off the trick? He would not say that people will go to Rwanda before the next election.
Exactly.
He kept
was asked
dodging
again and
it.
again, and he just said, I'm hoping in the spring.
OK. Yeah, we saw the Telegraph as well. The PM will use emergency laws to start Rwanda flights. The Guardian as well. PM vows to push through Rwanda plan after court rules it's unlawful. And the bottom line was, quite frankly, Rwanda isn't safe enough for migrants, and that you could be sent there as somebody from Afghanistan, and you could then be sent back to Afghanistan when you had possibly worked for the UK, for example.
And also...
a word that we all learned today.
That was the most graphic example of how wrong it could go. But Rishi gave nothing in his emergency press conference to the nation.
Except forcing, presumably, this treaty would force Rwanda to accept certain nations.
What does that treaty mean?
Being impossible to send people back to. That's
but of course, the judgment points out that in Rwanda, the rule of law is not respected in the way it is by most people in the UK. Not people like 30p Lee Anderson, who says, just ignore the law. I never thought... the Tory party's always billed itself as the party of law and order, and now some MPs just want to be lawlessness and disorder and ignore the law. But of course, there is a problem with freedom of speech in Rwanda. There's a problem with people just being detained arbitrarily. There is a problem with judges and tribunals not being independent, where you can see in the UK it is.
Pick another country. Don't go to Rwanda. Go somewhere else.
Well, that is what the judgment said.
Well, that's what a lot of countries in Europe are trying to do, as I heard you discuss last night in your show.
I read that Italy was thinking about Albania.
Italy, France, Germany, is it Sweden and Denmark are all looking for places, because this model can work. We just picked the wrong place.
I think it's very unlikely a decent democracy would allow itself to be used as a dumping ground. Basically accepting people with a bounty on their heads.
And just quick question. The Sun, and in fact the Daily Mail, are talking about how fed up he is. He's had this reshuffle, another reset, landed badly, you might say, in some quarters of the Conservative Party. Questions about David Cameron, as there were always going to be. Did you see him as fed up? Is that a good thing, that he comes across as cross and determined, do you think, Amanda?
I thought he came out at Prime Minister's questions quite fiery. I thought that Keir Starmer ate him for breakfast, or it's actually lunchtime, isn't it? Pre-lunch. And that he did come out. It's almost as though he'd had a kind of style guru there saying, you're going to be fierce, you're going to get you're going to be absolutely perfect, and you're going to go out and you're going to be really determined you're going to do this, and you're going to have to tell people a whole pile of things that...
OK.
Comes out as a loser. I mean, again, isn't it? He's lost again. That's what it is. Now, it's incompetence or fate or bad luck, but he's come out as a loser.
Or a fighter, because he's continuing, isn't he?
He's still lost.
It's a tale of two pledges today. Stop the boats being one, the other one inflation. Inflation tumbling to a two-year low of 4.6%, driven by a big easing in energy costs. We will discuss that when we come back.
It's fantastic news, and I think that paediatricians up and down the country will be delighted to hear that this vaccine has now been recommended for inclusion in the schedule. So what happened when they looked initially at the modelling data about the cost effectiveness of including the vaccine? What they looked at was the relationship between chickenpox and shingles. So when you get chickenpox, the virus hides in your nerve endings and can come out later as shingles. And managing shingles can be very expensive. It's a very unpleasant condition. So the idea was that having lots of chickenpox in the community would boost older people's immunity and then stop them from getting shingles. Now, what happened actually with 25 25 years worth of data from the US, where they've now had the vaccine in the routine schedule, that increase in shingles just hasn't happened. So I think that is then fed into the committee's decision to recommend this vaccine, which I'm certainly delighted about. Yes, so those very severe complications of chickenpox, they do happen. So severe inflammation of the lungs, severe inflammation of the brain, even having a stroke. Those are very unusual, very rare, though they do happen. More common complications are secondary bacterial infections of the skin. So particularly when you've been scratching a spot, you can get nasty bacterial infections. So we worry a lot about one called Group A streptococcus. And that can be unpleasant, painful, and really quite dangerous. And children ending up to need to take courses of antibiotics. But I'd say that even that mild disease can be miserable for children. And again, there's good evidence to show that actually that's really quite unpleasant. And I think most parents would be able to say their children had a miserable time of it. So again, being able to prevent children having that is really great. So on a personal level, I've had my son vaccinated for chickenpox, and I would, again, on a personal level, recommend to my friends and family that they would purchase the vaccine. That can be difficult for people who it's unaffordable or unavailable for. So again, I think this is great news that we're moving to a place of more equity where that vaccine will hopefully be available soon on the NHS. Oh, I'm sorry, my sympathy. I know that it's a miserable disease.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that, again, the thing to be careful about is if they look like they're starting getting better and then start having temperatures again, check their spots, make sure there isn't any spread of inflammation around the spots, because you just have to keep an eye out for that secondary bacterial infection.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail columnist, Amanda Patel. Lots to pack in, including what's happened to Labour in the Commons this afternoon. Given this is your neck of the woods, do you want to
and of course it will be leading most papers, it will be leading the news on almost any other day. But there we are, there was a huge revolt against Keir Starmer's line, no ceasefire, 56 Labour MPs defying him. That's more than a quarter of the parliamentary party, and he's got 8 frontbenchers who have now been deemed to
Jess Phillips, who is probably the best known of them all.
One of the greatest communicators Labour have.
Yeah.
The anti-domestic abuse spokeswoman, and 2 bag carriers, PPSs, have gone. It's a big blow.
And it's also a huge challenge to Keir Starmer's authority, because it was a 3-line whip. They knew how important this was. I feel very sorry for people like... the only one I sort of vaguely know is Jess, and I know that she's an incredibly principled woman and would have thought long and hard about this. And in the end, she put her principles before the stability of her government, because this will be interpreted now as an own goal. I bet you if Rishi drank, he would be popping champagne corks tonight, seeing that unfold, because suddenly the agenda's gone away from Rwanda, and it's gone onto Gaza and onto this rebellion. And it is a huge rebellion and a challenge for his authority.
Big. Others like Naz Shah, Sarah Oat, they would have had a very high expectation of being ministers in a Labour government in a year should Labour win the election. So when you rebel and you know you're going to pay that price, and you now probably not become a minister when Labour win, it shows you the strength of feeling over this, not calling for a ceasefire, calling a humanitarian pause, as Labour strengthens its position.
But politically,
but it's not calling for a ceasefire.
It jeopardises and weakens Keir Starmer on what should have been a triumphant day for him, disaster over Rwanda, It should have been his day.
OK, we're going to move on to inflation, if you don't mind. It's fallen to a two-year low. Obviously, just because inflation falls does not mean that prices are not going up still, which means it's still a difficult winter for many people.
Yeah. So,
You're going to let me speak first? My God. Let me catch my breath. The good news about this is that it means that there is even reported in some of the papers this morning that a number of the major banks are already doing a Christmas bonus offer to reduce mortgages. So even though it may not come in, and not everyone in the world, everyone in the country has a mortgage, obviously, but there have been people who've been hit really, really hard, and it looks as though those especially fixed-rate interests are going to be brought down by Christmas. So at least someone's going to get it. And Rishi did keep his promise.
He has. He's now hit. It's the first of his 5 goals he's hit. It might be the only goal he hits by the end of the year. But nevertheless, it's a big fall from 6.7 to 4.6. But he's not going to stop those boats. But as you say, prices are still going up. They're not going up as fast as they were. Still more than double the Bank of England's rate. But it's a bit of relief.
Running out of time. I know you wanted to talk about Prince Harry and the King. That was even you, the Republican. But anyway, we will have to wait and do that a bit later on. Both of you, thank you very much indeed. Let's see what the weather has in store.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So staying unsettled through the weekend with spells of wind and rain, followed by more showery days. Northern and central parts will have a calm, chilly and mostly dry start tomorrow, with a patchy frost and some fog, while the south will be mostly overcast and wet. Ireland and southern parts of both England and Wales can expect locally heavy rain through the morning, although the east of Ireland may turn dry for a time later. Elsewhere, northern and central Britain looking mainly dry.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.